On Friday, December 22nd, 1947, inside the Palazzo Montecitorio in Rome, the Constituent Assembly of the Italian Republic voted to approve the final text of a new constitution. Buried near the end of the document, past the articles defining citizenship, sovereignty, and the powers of the state, sat a block of transitional provisions meant to govern the handover from the kingdom that had just been abolished to the republic that was about to begin. The 13th of those provisions ran to fewer than 200 words. In 3 paragraphs it barred the male descendants of the House of Savoy and the former Queen's consort from setting foot on Italian soil. It transferred every piece of their Italian property to the state. It abolished their noble titles. The law would take effect on the 1st of January 1948. 556 deputies were seated in the chamber. The family whose ancestor, Humbert the White-Handed, had been made Count of Aosta in the year 1003 had been legislated out of existence in a single afternoon. The provision is not a historical curiosity. 11 months ago, on the 16th of May 2025, a judge in the Civil Court of Rome named Mario Tanferna invoked it to reject the Savoy family's latest attempt to reclaim 6,732 diamonds, 2,000 pearls, and 14 principal pieces of jewellery that have been sealed inside a Bank of Italy vault on Via Nazionale since 5 o'clock in the afternoon on the 5th of June 1946. The same law that exiled Umberto II in June of that year is still being used, 78 years later, to keep the family out of what was taken. What follows is the story of that law and of the fortune it seized. The palaces, the library that holds Leonardo da Vinci's red chalk self-portrait. The casket was sealed with 11 wax seals on a 12-layer stamp paper receipt. The valuations that range from a few million euros to more than 300 million. The 260 million euros the family once demanded in moral damages, and then quietly withdrew. The judge who ruled 11 months ago that none of it would ever come back. On the night of the 12th of June 1946, Prime Minister Alcide de Gasperi convened his cabinet without waiting for the Supreme Court of Cassation to certify the results of the referendum 10 days earlier. The preliminary count had already given the Republic a margin of roughly 2 million votes, 12,717,923 in favour of the Republic against 10,719,284 for the monarchy on an 89% turnout. The final tally, certified by the court on the 18th of June, would revise those figures upward by a few hundred votes each. The margin did not change. De Gasperi's cabinet voted that night to transfer the provisional powers of the head of state from the king to the prime minister. Umberto II denounced the move in a proclamation drafted the same night. He called it a gesto rivoluzionario, a revolutionary act. He refused to sign an abdication. Advisors urged him to call on the Carabinieri and the loyal army units still stationed in Rome. He refused that too. His answer, preserved in the memoir of his minister of the royal household Falcone Lucifero, has been quoted in nearly every serious history of the period. "My house has united Italy. I will not divide it." The North had voted for the Republic at 66.2%. The South had voted for the monarchy at 63.8%. Naples had voted for the monarchy at 79.9%. Umberto had reigned for exactly 34 days since his father Vittorio Emanuele III had abdicated on the 9th of May 1946. He had a kingdom split geographically in half. He had no political will left in his own cabinet. The flight from Rome was only the beginning. The law that would follow the family into exile had not yet been written. At roughly 3 o'clock on the afternoon of the 13th of June 1946, Umberto left the Quirinale Palace for the last time. The corazzieri, the presidential cuirassiers who had guarded the royal family since 1868, lined the courtyard. Their commander shouted the ceremonial phrase reserved for the sovereign's departure. Guardia del Re salute al Re. The palace servants wept openly. A carabinieri officer standing at the gate reached for Umberto's hand as he passed and said, according to the account Lucifero later recorded, "Your Majesty, we will never forget you." Umberto drove to Ciampino Airfield. A Savoia Marchetti SM-95, a 4-engine military transport aircraft, was already fueled on the runway, her boarded with a small suitcase. At 8 o'clock that evening he landed at Cascais on the Portuguese coast, where the Pinto Basto family had offered the Villa Italia as a private residence. He would live there for the next 37 years. He would never see Italy again. The suitcase Umberto carried onto the aircraft contained what a family permitted to flee a country is permitted to take. 8 days earlier, on the 5th of June, his minister of the royal household had walked into the Bank of Italy and left the rest. Queen Marie-José, born a Belgian princess, had already crossed separately into Switzerland with the couple's 4 children. She had packed her own personal jewels, the pieces documented as private inheritance from her Belgian mother, and left behind what had been presented to her as consort, which she believed belonged to the crown, not to her. She and Umberto would live apart for the next 37 years. They never divorced. They never reconciled. She died in Thonex, near Geneva, on the 27th of January 2001, aged 94. 18 months after the Cascais landing, the Constituent Assembly in Rome finished drafting the new constitution. The central document was more than 130 articles long. It defined Italy as a democratic republic founded on labour. It guaranteed rights of speech, assembly, and religion. It separated the powers of the state. And at the end, before the final signatures, came a section titled Disposizioni transitorie e finali, transitional and final provisions. There were 18 such provisions. Most were administrative. The 13th was not. The first paragraph of the 13th provision read, "Members and descendants of the House of Savoy shall not be electors and may not hold public or elected office. The former kings of the House of Savoy, their consorts and their male descendants shall be prohibited from entering and staying on the national territory." The second paragraph confirmed that all property belonging to the former kings, their consorts, and their male descendants on Italian territory was to be transferred to the state. The third paragraph abolished the legal recognition of the titles of nobility. The provision was ratified on the 22nd of December, 1947. It entered into force on the 1st of January 1948. The House of Savoy had reigned for 943 years. The law ending its presence in Italy ran to 187 words. What the third paragraph transferred to the Republic had no precedent in modern European dispossession. The Quirinale Palace in Rome, 110,500 square metres, built by Pope Gregory XIII in 1583, seized by the House of Savoy in 1870, and from the 1st of January 1948, the official residence of the President of the Italian Republic. The Palazzo Reale of Turin, the dynasty's founding seat. Villa Savoia on the outskirts of Rome, 160 hectares of parkland now public, with the main villa serving as the Egyptian embassy. The castle of Racconigi in Piedmont, the birthplace of Umberto II himself. The Reggia di Venaria Reale, a Baroque palace complex that would be restored between 1999 and 2007 at a cost exceeding €245 million, inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The San Rossore estate in Tuscany, the presidential country residence from 1957 to 1999. The Palazzo Reale of Genoa, the Castle of Sare in the Aosta Valley, and the Biblioteca Reale of Turin. The library held and still holds the red chalk self-portrait of Leonardo da Vinci, drawn around 1515. It holds the Codex on the Flight of Birds, one of Leonardo's surviving manuscripts. It holds more than 200,000 printed works and more than 4,000 manuscripts. None of it belongs to the Savoys anymore. None of it has since the 1st of January 1948. The property was gone. The titles were gone. The right to set foot on Italian soil was gone. One thing remained unresolved. At 5 o'clock on the afternoon of the 5th of June, 1946, 3 days after the referendum, 8 days before Umberto's flight from Ciampino, Minister Falcone Lucifero walked into the Bank of Italy at number 91 Via Nazionale in Rome. He was accompanied by the Grand Officer of the Royal Household, Livio Annesi. They carried a 3-tiered leather chest. They were received by the governor of the bank, Luigi Einaudi, who would in less than 2 years become the first elected president of the Italian Republic. Lucifero handed Einaudi the chest. He also handed him a receipt written on 12-layer stamp paper, bearing the seal of the royal household. The text of the receipt described the contents as «Legioe di dotazione della corona del regno», the jewels of endowment of the crown of the kingdom. The receipt specified that the chest was to be held a ci di diritto, for the rightful owner. 11 seals were affixed to the chest in the presence of Einaudi. 5 bore the arms of the ministry of the royal household. 6 bore the arms of the Bank of Italy. The chest was placed in the bank's subterranean vault. The phrase a ci di diritto is the legal fulcrum on which every subsequent Savoy lawsuit has turned. It does not name an owner. It does not specify whether the rightful owner is the House of Savoy, the Italian state, or a future party to be determined. Einaudi himself, in a diary entry the Bank of Italy would publish decades later, wrote that his impression in that moment was that Umberto had demonstrated great scruple, since it could be argued that the jewels belonged not to the state, but to the royal family. The casket has been opened officially exactly once since the 5th of June 1946. In the summer of 1976, an Italian weekly magazine called Il Borghese published allegations that the contents had been stolen or substituted. A Roman prosecutor opened an investigation. The casket was brought out, the 11 seals verified intact, and 2 independent examiners were admitted to the vault to inspect the contents. One was Gianni Bulgari of the jewellery house. The other was Tito Vespasiani, the president of the Italian Goldsmiths Association. Vespasiani, according to multiple Italian press accounts of the inspection, turned to the officials present and said, "Is it possible that these items are really the treasure of the Kingdom of Italy?" The inventory compiled from that inspection, reconciled with the 1957 royal records, lists roughly 14 principal pieces. 6,732 diamonds, approximately 2,000 carats in total weight, not counts, more than 2,000 pearls, emeralds, rubies and sapphires distributed across earrings, brooches and tiaras. The most valuable individual piece is Queen Margherita's Musi tiara, commissioned in 1883 by King Umberto I for his wife's coronation. 541 diamonds, 11 drop pearls, 64 circular pearls, and 1,040 brilliants totaling 2,092 carats, mounted on platinum by the Turin jewellers Musi Padre e Figli. A bow-shaped brooch featuring a rare pink diamond surrounded by hundreds of smaller stones. An 11-scrolled diamond and pearl tiara that the jewellery historian Stefano Papi has described as the most important single piece in the casket. Various Musi earrings, diadems and secondary brooches. The casket has been resealed after each verification. The seals on it today were placed in 1976. No one has opened it in 49 years. Gianni Bulgari, who had stood in the vault in the summer of 1976, would give his own valuation of the full treasure in a letter to the Corriere della Sera journalist Milena Gabanelli in the spring of 2021. His figure and the figure the Savoy family's auction assessors would produce differed by 2 orders of magnitude. Umberto lived in the Villa Italia in Cascais for 37 years. He broadcast a New Year's Eve message to Italy every 31st of December from 1946 to 1982. The content varied little. He called for national reconciliation. He said nothing against the Republic. He closed each broadcast with the phrase from his final proclamation of the 13th of June 1946. Whatever fate awaits our country, it will always be able to count on me as the most devoted of its sons. United Press International, in its obituary of Umberto on the 18th of March 1983, noted that there was no shortage of money in the Cascais years. The source of those funds has never been forensically accounted for. The Portuguese government granted Umberto a courtesy diplomatic status. The Pinto Basto family covered housing. Umberto sold paintings and minor personal possessions periodically through discreet European auctions. Marie José, living separately in Switzerland, drew on her Belgian inheritance. No one has ever produced an audited figure for what remained of the Savoy private fortune in exile. It was enough. It was not what they had left behind. There is a larger structural question that runs underneath the story of the referendum and the law. Why did no serious political force in post-war Italy attempt to restore the monarchy? Mezzogiorno had voted for it by 63%. Naples had voted for it by nearly 80%. The monarchist party won 16 seats in the 1948 elections. And yet within a decade the cause was politically dead. I covered the Vatican's pattern of abandoning Catholic dynasties for institutional survival in an earlier video on the fall of European monarchies. The Savoys were the clearest single case of what that abandonment cost. Pope Pius IX's decree of 1868, known as the Non-Expedie, had forbidden Italian Catholics from voting in the kingdom's elections, a rupture that never fully healed. The Lateran Accords of 1929, signed between Benito Mussolini and Pope Pius XI, reconciled the Church permanently to an Italian state without a king. By the time Umberto flew to Lisbon, the only institution with a national reach to restore the dynasty had already spent 60 years treating its survival as a matter of indifference. Umberto died of lung cancer in the Geneva Cantonal Hospital at 1:30 in the morning on the 18th of March 1983. He was 78 years old. 5 weeks earlier, President Sandro Pertini had asked the Italian Parliament to suspend the exile provision of the 13th Transitional Clause so that Umberto could return home to die. Parliament debated the measure. Parliament didn't pass it in time. Lucifero, at the bedside in the final hours, recorded that Umberto's last word was Italia. He is buried at the Abbey of Haute-Combe in the French Savoy, in the same crypt where Marie José was later interred in 2001. If you're still with the story at this point, the law, the vault, the 37 years of broadcasts, you might consider subscribing. The channel covers what happens to the people inside historical collapse after the throne is gone, and viewers who stay through a story like this are exactly the audience this work is made for. In November of 2007, 59 years and 10 months after the 13th transitional provision entered into force, a 7-page letter was delivered to the office of Italian Prime Minister Romano Prodi and to the office of President Giorgio Napolitano. The letter was signed by Umberto's son, Vittorio Emanuele, then 70 years old, and by Vittorio Emanuele's son, Emanuele Filiberto, then 35. It was drafted by the family's lawyer, Sergio Calvetti. It demanded €170 million for Vittorio Emanuele and €90 million for Emanuele Filiberto, a total of €260 million. The letter framed the sum as moral damages for 56 years of exile in violation of the European Convention on Human Rights. It cited Article 3 of the Convention on inhuman or degrading treatment. It cited the precedent of the compensation Greece had been ordered to pay the deposed King Constantine II. The dollar equivalents in the international press coverage that followed ranged from $274 million to $380 million, depending on the day's exchange rate. English-language reporters filed the story as an unspecified multi-hundred-million-dollar claim. The approximate figure of $335 million has circulated in secondary coverage ever since. The original demand letter, in euros, asked for $260 million. The reaction in Rome was not what the family had anticipated. Politicians across the spectrum proposed that the Republic should countersue the Savoys for the racial laws of 1938, which Vittorio Emanuele III had signed, and for the catastrophe of the war that followed. Giulio Andreotti, the former Prime Minister, noted publicly that any property claim belonged to the estate of Umberto II, not to his grandson. Emanuele Filiberto appeared on the Italian television channel TG5 and gave an interview in which he said, "We have asked our lawyers to contact the Italian government to examine the problem. It is well known that from 1948 on, Italy went against the Convention on Human Rights. The phrasing did not improve the reception. Within weeks, the claim was quietly withdrawn. No court ever issued a ruling. No settlement was disclosed. The family's public position reverted to the pre-2007 position, which was that they wished to reopen a dialogue with the Italian state in principle, but were not pursuing specific compensation in practice." It was during the aftermath of the withdrawn claim that Gianni Bulgari wrote to Corriere della Sera with his valuation of the casket. The letter appeared in the spring of 2021. Bulgari, who had examined the contents in person in 1976, stated that the entire treasure, if sold today, would be worth at most a few million euros. He wrote that there were no coloured stones of consequence and no brilliance of real value. He attributed the magnificence of the pieces to their historical provenance and their settings, not to the stones themselves. Sotheby's, engaged by the Savoy family to produce a counter-valuation, had assessed the same contents at €260 million. The journalistic shorthand that has since circulated, €300 million, roughly $335 million, sits above Sotheby's figure and several orders of magnitude above Bulgari's. No independent examination has been permitted since 1976. The true value of what sits inside the 11 seals on Via Nazionale remains unknown. In November of 2021, a new lawyer for the Savoy family, Sergio Orlandi, filed a formal restitution request with the Bank of Italy. The request sought the return of the casket to the family. The bank rejected it in December. Under Italian law, disputes of this nature require a mandatory mediation session before litigation can proceed. The session was held on the 25th of January 2022 in Rome, before the mediator Giovanni De Luca. It failed within a single morning. On the same day, Emanuele Filiberto gave an interview to Corriere della Sera. His line in that interview has been repeated in every subsequent piece of coverage. That the jewels remain locked in a Bank of Italy vault is ridiculous. If we get them back, we will have them exhibited. He proposed a permanent public display modelled on the Tower of London. The lawsuit was filed in the spring of 2022 in the Civil Court of Rome, Second Civil Section. The plaintiffs were all four surviving children of Umberto II, Vittorio Emanuele, Maria Pia, Maria Gabriella, and Maria Beatrice. The defendants were the Presidency of the Council of Ministers, the Ministry of Economy and Finance, and the Bank of Italy. The suit did not specify a monetary amount. It sought restitution of the physical contents of the casket. The family's argument rested on Ainaudi's diary entry of the 5th of June, 1946, on the Ecce di Diritto language of the original receipt, and on the assertion that the pieces were personal property of specific Savoys acquired since the mid-19th century, not state endowment. The ruling came down on the 16th of May, 2025. Judge Mario Tanferna rejected every element of the Savoy claim. The written decision invoked the royal law of the 16th of March, 1850, which had established the Crown endowment as state property assigned ex officio, and the 13th transitional provision of the 1948 Constitution. It declared the family's constitutional challenge manifestly unfounded. It refused the family's request to refer the question to the European Court of Justice. It dismissed Ainaudi's diary as lacking decisive value. Its central holding was one sentence: "The jewels never belonged to King Umberto II. They have been the state's since the time of the Albertine Statute." The former chief lawyer of the Bank of Italy, Olina Capolino, gave a statement to the Italian press the same afternoon. She welcomed the ruling and said the state should soon display these historic pieces in a museum. The law, written on the 22nd of December, 1947, was still being enforced by an Italian court in May of 2025. 77 years, 4 months, and 24 days later. Forward looking to your own reaction. The 2025 ruling is under appeal, and the family has announced it will take the case to the European Court of Human Rights. If you followed the full sequence of the law, the vault, the withdrawn claim, and the 2025 judgment, the question of whether Strasbourg should reopen what Rome has closed is a live one. I'd want to know what you think. One member of the family had led both the 2007 campaign and the 2022 lawsuit. He would not live to see the appeal filed. Vittorio Emanuele, Prince of Naples, was born in Naples on the 12th of February 1937. He was Umberto II's only son. He was 9 years old when his family flew to Cascais. He grew up in exile, educated in Portugal, Switzerland, and England. He trained as a pilot and later as an industrial executive. He married the Swiss water skier Marina Doria in Tehran in 1971, in a civil ceremony that his father Umberto, still living in Cascais, had refused to authorize under the old Savoy dynastic law of 1780, which required the head of the house's consent for a valid marriage. On the night of the 17th of August 1978 on Cavallo Island off the southern coast of Corsica, Vittorio Emanuele armed himself with an M1 carbine after an argument over a rubber dinghy and fired 2 rounds at a yacht moored nearby. One of the bullets passed through the hull and severed the femoral artery of a 19-year-old German named Dirk Hamer, who was asleep below decks. Hamer underwent approximately 14 operations over the following 4 months, including the amputation of 1 leg. He died in a Munich hospital on the 7th of December, 1978. Vittorio Emanuele paid 500,000 French francs in civil compensation to the Hamer family in September of 1978. He was extradited to France and tried at the Paris Court of Assizes in November of 1991. The fatal bullet had been lost in the intervening 13 years. Most of the 30 young Italian and French witnesses present on Cavallo Island the night of the shooting were never called to testify. He was acquitted of homicide. He was convicted of illegal possession of a firearm and sentenced to 6 months suspended. On the 16th of June 2006, he was arrested by Italian police at Varenna on Lake Como by the Potenza prosecutor Henry John Woodcock. The charges were criminal association, corruption in the issuing of slot machine licenses at the Casino di Campione d'Italia, and exploitation of prostitution involving Eastern European women procured for clients of the casino. He spent 7 days in a Potenza prison. On the 21st of June, 2006, a concealed microphone in his cell recorded him speaking to another prisoner about the 1991 Paris trial. The phrase the microphone recorded has been quoted in every subsequent Italian newspaper account of his life. Anche se avevo torto, devo dire che li ho fregati. Even though I was in the wrong, I must say I fooled them. He was acquitted of the 2006 charges in September of 2010. He was awarded €40,000 in 2015 for wrongful detention. On the 3rd of August 2017, the Italian Supreme Court of Cassation, in a civil proceeding brought by Dirk Hammer's sister Birgit, ruled that Vittorio Emanuele bore civil and ethical responsibility for the death of Dirk Hammer. The French acquittal was 26 years old and no longer shielded him in Italian civil court. He died at the Geneva University Cantonal Hospital at 7:07 in the morning on the 3rd of February, 2024, 9 days before his 87th birthday. His funeral was held on the 10th of February, 2024, in the Cathedral of Turin, the first Savoy head of family to be buried there since King Carlo Alberto. In 1849, Queen Sofia of Spain attended, Prince Albert II of Monaco attended. Ignazio La Russa, the president of the Italian Senate, attended as a private friend of the family and told the press afterward that the Savoy dynasty had had lights and shadows. The government of Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni made no state gesture. Vittorio Emanuele's ashes were interred at the Basilica of Superga on the 1st of July 2024. The second claimant line, meanwhile, had been preparing its own succession. Prince Amedeo, the 5th Duke of Aosta, born on the 27th of September 1943, had declared himself head of the House of Savoy on the 7th of July 2006. His argument was that Vittorio Emanuele's 1971 civil marriage in Tehran, performed without Umberto II's authorization, had forfeited the main line's dynastic rights under Victor Amadeus III's decree of 1780. The dispute between the two branches was not conducted primarily through legal briefs. In May of 2004, at the wedding reception of the future King Felipe VI of Spain and Letizia Ortiz in Madrid, Vittorio Emanuele approached Amedeo and punched him twice in the face. Amedeo fell backward. Queen Anne-Marie of Greece, standing nearby, caught him. An Italian court in Arezzo issued an initial ruling in favour of Vittorio Emanuele in 2010. The ruling was overturned on appeal. The question of which branch heads the House of Savoy has never been legally settled. Amedeo died on the 1st of June 2021. His son, Aimone, the 6th Duke of Aosta, born on the 13th of October 1967, now carries the Aosta claim. He is a senior executive at Pirelli. He has served since 2019 as the Sovereign Military Order of Malta's ambassador to Russia. He is married to Princess Olga of Greece. He has 2 sons, Umberto, born in 2009, and Amedeo, born in 2011. Aimone has made his position on the dual suit public. Speaking to Corriere della Sera in the weeks following the filing of the 2022 lawsuit, he said, "It makes no sense. They belonged to the Crown and therefore the 13th provision was very clear. Everything was confiscated." Vittorio Emanuele, aware that his own main line had no grandsons and that the Aosta branch had 2, issued a succession decree on the 28th of December 2019, his granddaughter's 16th birthday. The decree was made public in January of 2020. It abolished the requirement of male primogeniture that had governed Savoy's succession for approximately 1,000 years. It named his granddaughter Vittoria, born on the 28th of December 2003. as heir to the headship of the house after her father Emanuele Filiberto. Vittoria di Savoia is the first female heir in the recorded history of the dynasty. She is represented by Karin models in Paris. She has walked runways for Dior, Valentino, Pucci and Miu Miu. She is the first woman ever admitted to the Supreme Order of the Most Holy Annunciation, the dynastic order of knighthood founded in the year 1362. Her father, Emanuele Filiberto, Prince of Venice, born in Geneva on the 22nd of June 1972, is the current head of the main line and the active public face of the family. He won the Italian celebrity dance competition Ballando con le Stelle in March of 2009. On the 15th of June 2017, he launched a food truck in Los Angeles called Prince of Venice, promoted as the world's first fresh pasta machine on wheels, with flour sourced from Piedmont and truffles from Campo Basso. The truck is listed as closed on restaurant review sites. A brick-and-mortar restaurant operating under the same name continues to serve customers in Westwood, California. In 2024, he launched a video game called Royaland, developed jointly with deposed or non-reigning royals from Albania, Bulgaria, France, and Yugoslavia. His 2003 marriage to the French actress Clotilde Courreau ended in separation disclosed in March of 2025. He confirmed to the Italian magazine Oggi in the early months of 2026 that formal divorce proceedings had begun. He gave the magazine an interview the same week. One line from it has been widely quoted. It's now more than 70 or 80 years since we have had a monarchy in Italy. At a certain point, they should say, OK, let's make peace with the House of Savoy. The Italian Republic has not said it. In October of 2025, 5 months after Judge Tanferna's ruling, Emanuele Filiberto, now replacing his late father in the caption of the case, filed an appeal with the Rome Court of Appeal. The appeal asked the higher court to order the casket opened for the first time since 1976, so that its contents could be independently verified. Sergio Orlandi, the family lawyer, announced the same month that if the appeal failed, he would take the case to the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. The Strasbourg filing, he told the Italian press, would seek not only the return of the jewels, but the restitution by the Italian state of the value of all the real estate belonging to the Savoy family. The appeal is pending as of this writing. No date has been set for a hearing. The casket on Via Nazionale has not been opened since 1976. The 11 seals placed on it then, 5 of the Ministry of the Royal Household and 6 of the Bank of Italy, are intact. The last judicial ruling on its contents is the judgment of the 16th of May, 2025. The Quirinale Palace remains the residence of the President of the Italian Republic. The red chalk self-portrait of Leonardo da Vinci remains in the Biblioteca Reale of Turin. The Venaria Reale remains a public UNESCO site. Villa Savoia remains a public park. The 13th transitional provision of the Italian Constitution remains, in its property clause, in force. Vittoria di Savoia is 22 years old. She has no children. Her younger sister Luisa has no children. In the rival Aosta line, 2 boys, Umberto, aged 16, and Amedeo, aged 14, are being raised to expect a title that no Italian court has ever recognized as theirs. If the European Court of Human Rights accepts the case and rules against Italy, the judgment of Judge Tanferna will not be the last word, and the seals on Via Nazionale will eventually be broken. If it rules for Italy or declines to hear the case, the casket stays closed, and the House of Savoy, after 943 years of rule and 79 years of exile, owns nothing of what its family built. The seals will hold, or they will not. No one alive today can say which.